Okay, so the job of the movie distributor is to make sure that people know about their movie, and because of that, they're very powerful. They don't get called out publicly. But the Twitter account of the movie Origin called out his distributor. Today on the podcast, what does it tell us about Hollywood right now? I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, let me just start by setting the table. Ava DuVernay is one of the most respected filmmakers around right now. She made Selma, the Martin Luther King movie from 2014. That got a Best Picture nomination. She was the first black woman to direct a movie with a $100 million budget. And last year, she made a movie called Origin. It's an adaptation of the book Cast, The Origin of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. And I want you to hear Ava doing press last month for Origin.
I think, the biggest lessons that I'm learning are now, not the writing, directing, and producing, but the struggle and challenge to connect it with audiences in the current climate and with the kind of demeanor of our partners. It has been, a bit of an uphill journey.
Uphill journey, I think, is a bit of an understatement. Ava DuVernay talking about the challenge of getting audiences to see her latest film, Origin. Here's the thing. Origin is a pretty ambitious movie. A lot of critics liked it. It sort of tries to take on a big theory book and make it come to life. But it's also a movie that major studios did not fund. They did not come on board with this movie. It did badly at the box office. It got 0 Oscar nominations. Listen, Ava DuVernay has been very vocal about the lack of industry support that Origin has received. But what raised eyebrows recently were a series of tweets from the official Twitter account for the movie. Those tweets were basically dragging Neon, the film's distributor, for not properly supporting and promoting the movie. Kathleen Newman-Bremang, Sarah-Tai Black, and Jackson Weaver are here. They got thoughts on this. Kathleen, Jackson, Sarah-Tai, welcome to the show, everybody. How's it going?
Hello, it's good.
Hi. Good. This feels like a spicy topic. Kathleen, I'm going to start with you. It feels unlikely to me that Ava herself is running that account. But let's put this in context. How often do you see a movie use social media to directly drag its distributor like that?
Never. I mean, I think this is pretty unprecedented. I think we see after the fact directors talk about studios and how they maybe didn't support their films in the way that they wanted them to, or actors saying the same thing. And we hear what Ava said, what we just heard, which is talking about the struggle to connect, the film and its content to its audiences, which is really the studio's job. But this was new for me, but I found it refreshing because I think points were made. And I kind of was I loved that it was coming from an official source-ish in the Twitter account.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure to just sort of perform niceties in these moments. Be like, I'm so grateful that the distributor's doing their job, et cetera, et cetera. But this was a very, sort of firm break from reality. And I agree with you. I found it refreshing too. But maybe let's just give people an overview, Kathleen, of what was shared on the Origin Twitter account before it was deleted. I should say it was deleted not that long after it was tweeted.
Oh, right after. Somebody got to them. they got. Okay, so basically they were calling out Neon for not inviting the filmmakers of Origin to its Oscar party. So in a quote tweet of a photo from the party, the account said, "Is it odd that the filmmakers of Neon's current film in theaters weren't invited to this Neon celebration? Nope. Standard operating procedure for founder Tom Quinn and team. That's how Neon rolls. More on this later." They didn't get to the later. But for context, Neon had another film that was in Oscar contention, Anatomy of a Fall, that won Oscars. It was nominated for a bunch. Yeah. And then DuVernay and the Origin's producer, Paul Gaines, they were at the Oscars, and they also then went to a Vanity Fair party, which is strange for them to not go to their own studio's party. Right. So yeah, the account was calling that out. And then they had also been retweeting people who were upset that it didn't get the distribution or the awards accolades that people thought Origin deserved.
I want to be clear. This is not about being invited to one party over another party. Like,
No.
yeah, well, you still got to go to the Vanity Fair party. That seemed like it was all right for you.
Right.
This is not bad. This is about sort of a larger slight in terms of, you know, giving a movie its proper run and its proper sort of promotion and sort of, you know, pushing it through all the channels that it needs to be pushed to. Kathleen just mentioned that Neon had a bunch of other movies at the Oscars. They also had Perfect Days, which was nominated for an Oscar, Michael Mann's biopic Ferrari, and then also Anatomy of a Fall, which did end up winning some Oscars. Could a part of this be that Neon bit off more than it could chew in terms of all the movies that it could sort of, you know, throw down the pipeline?
I mean, if you're looking at whether this movie succeeds at the Oscars, whether they got the support from its studio to succeed at the Oscars, then like, yeah, Neon did not have that in the cards to be able to help all of their movies be successful, get awards, throw money at all of them.
Yeah.
But like, that's also kind of like what their strategy is. So they knew exactly how much they were biting off, and they knew exactly how much they were going to chew, and they knew they were not going to chew this movie. And I think Ava kind of knew that as well. She's been on podcasts saying like, this is not going to win at the box office. This is not going to be on your TVs. This is not going to have commercials. Like, so just go see it because we have a thing we're trying to do with this movie.
Yeah.
But what distributors do is they like get a bunch of movies together. They get all the ones that they want to make in a given year, and they choose, okay, here's our hobby horse. Here's our big winner, and we're going all in on this one. Like, look at A24. They had obviously success as well this year, but they had other great movies that just didn't get any awards, weren't released in a time period to win awards, to get the buzz leading up to the Oscars, because they can't do it for every film. And this film particularly, regardless of whether you think that it's like amazing, if it breaks the bounds of what we can do with film, if you think that it's something that needs to be seen by more people, it's not the kind of film that is just going to succeed at these awards. So it's strategic and it's part of their plan, but depending on whose side you're looking at it from, I don't know who wanted what to get chewed.
Sure. I want to bring up something that is important, because I think sometimes people think, you know, Oscars are won because voters sit around and go, this was the best movie, and I believe that to be the case. Oscar voters are lobbied so hard for months and months and months and months. And the thing that you just mentioned about like A24 makes a bunch of movies in a year, but when award seasons come, like, they lean heavily into one, maybe two movies. You know, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, they were, you know, all out campaigning for every single category. You know, like they are the kind of, I think that this year, you know, they made Past Lives. Past Lives was getting all of that energy for promotion. It wasn't like they were trying to sort of reach back into the year and go like, remember that movie that came out in April? We should really give it this awards push. Sarah-Tai, when you think of all of this scene and the support, or not lack of support, that Origin's gotten, what do you make of all of this?
I mean, I think it's interesting that we saw more of Messi the dog from Anatomy of a Fall. Did see Ava DuVernay. I think that's really telling.
People felt that was cheating too.
Which I get it. Like, give me more. Like, put it right in my veins. I love it. But it's super transparent when like a literal dog is getting more press than you. And I also kind of I want to push back on Jackson a bit, because I think that Ava actually makes films that are very respectable, as in respectability, for better and for worse. And that, you know, if you look at her past work, these are ostensibly films that like a majority not Black, let's say, voting pool would potentially be drawn to. These are kind of Oscar baity films. And so it's just a situation where you're like, if Ava DuVernay can't get the votes, who can? What kind of like interesting, unique, different biting works are we not going to be able to see? And there's so many bad movies that get so much press. I don't know if you guys feel this way as film critics, but it's like, oh my, we are in need of help. Like, it hurts to go to the movies these days. So it's just like, regardless of how you feel about Origin, I myself really did not like it. It still deserves a chance alongside all the other films that aren't amazing. So yeah.
I would say that the Oscars is not about the best movie, though. And the way the distributors look at it is not making their best artistic movie get there. They're looking at the movie that the most people are going to vote for. And that's, unfortunately, a lot of the times, Green Book. That's a great studio decision. What a bad movie.
For me, this was a green bookie. That's what I'm saying. I definitely, in my opinion,
very fair.
Yeah.
Put a pin in Green Book because I think we're going to talk about it in the latter half of this conversation. Actually,
lucky us. Great day for Black people today.
but before we get there, I want to stick with this though. I want to stick with this because this is more about industry dynamics, and I think like that is sort of a larger question to be asked here. So Kathleen, like no studio wanted to fund Origin. You know, Ava was only able to make this movie because she literally had to go to philanthropists like Melinda Gates. She had to go to the NBA star Chris Paul and the Ford Foundation. And then like she had a $38 million budget. She had to sort of scrape it together from all those funding sources. And then this movie comes out. It only makes about $5 million at the box office. Were you surprised at all by its poor performance?
I don't think I was surprised. I think the funding maybe was more of a surprising note.
Yeah.
Why is Chris Paul in it? But I think that,
yeah,
you know, it's really hard to make money at the box office right now, you know, unless it's a big IP movie like Barbie or a rom-com starring Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell. I think it's hard. And so this is the type of film that I actually think does need to be watched widely. And I agree with Sarah-Tai and with Jackson that Ava makes work that isn't necessarily for us, which I know is frustrating as Black critics and as Black fans of film. But I think that she makes archival work that if somebody's trying to come at you with, you know, very low knowledge of race and racism and maybe caste systems, you can say, hey, go watch this movie. It'll present it in a very
palatable,
accessible, palatable, emotional way. She's a good emotional storyteller. So I wish this movie did better at the box office, but I don't think that I expected it to. And especially because we are in a post 2020 world where people don't want to go back there and talk about race anymore. And they also truly, and I think that they don't want to engage with these truths in that way. And they also don't want to feel like they're watching something that is homework. I would not classify this movie as that, but I think that that's how people saw it. And I think that's part of why it didn't do so well. But I don't think that box office performance of this film is the best gauge of its importance, which is why I think Ava has been so upset about the lack of awards, because I think in her mind, she was like, this is an Oscar Beatty type of movie. This is a movie that is going to stand the test of time critically and with awarding bodies, because it's not going to do the box office. So the fact that it didn't do any of the above, I think really, really hit her, especially as a director of her caliber and her clout. And if she was a white man, I do think we'd be having a different conversation.
First, let me say, like, Origin worked for me. Like that, I watched that movie, and I didn't come out of it saying, oh, this was a homeworky movie. I sort of read it as like, here's this journey of the real life author, you know, Isabel Wilkerson, who wrote the book Caste, and this grand unifying theory of racism is like, if you've never had to ask yourself questions about racism, this is going to be the first place that you start sort of asking those questions. I think you're right about emotionalizing the story. That sort of makes it an effective vehicle for inviting those questions in. I don't know if it's necessarily like the best or most urgent story to be told. I think she actually tells some of that work and the most complex stuff of her work, Sarah-Tai, in her documentary work. I'm thinking here of like 13th, for example. So when you think about the idea that like she's had these successful documentary works, but also when these movies come out, I'm thinking of here also like the box office flop, A Wrinkle in Time, and now Origin. Where do you think Ava's career goes from here, Sarah-Tai? Because it kind of seems to be like sort of an open question at this point.
Yeah, it's also going back to that very frustrating reality right now of like false scarcity in the industry. It's like wild to see a movie like Dune, like no shade to Dune, don't come for me. But like the millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars thrown at a Dune movie, thrown at a Marvel movie. And like Ava DuVernay, no matter how you feel about her, also deserves her seat at the table. She's also making films that are very much a seat at the table. So it's really frustrating when a lauded filmmaker can't adapt a Pulitzer Prize winning author's book who was on the Oprah's book club list and like can't have quote unquote box office success. It's so deeply transparent. And I think no matter how you feel about Ava, as we've kind of been saying, it is really a sign of the times.
Folks are just joining us. This is Commotion. My name is Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. Kathleen Newman-Bremang is here. Sarah-Tai Black is here. Jackson Weaver is here. And now we are switching gears to this.
Welcome to the American Society of Magical Negroes.
What's the most dangerous animal on the planet?
Shark.
White people, when they feel uncomfortable. White people feeling uncomfortable precedes a lot of bad stuff for us. That's why we fight white discomfort every day. Because the happier they are, the safer we are.
Okay, look, I liked that trailer when it came out. That's the trailer for the American Society of Magical Negroes. And as you just learned there, this is a secret society of black folks. They're on a mission to make white people feel as comfortable as possible in their whiteness so that black people are just kind of left alone. It stars Justice Smith and veteran comedian David Alan Grier. It's also the directorial debut of comedian turned filmmaker Kobe Libby. Jackson, before we get into this whole thing, can we just talk a little bit about the term Magical Negro? Well, I think most people associate it with Spike Lee. What was Spike getting at when he started using the term Magical Negro?
I mean, I think even if you are surprised, I've talked about this movie to some of my friends. They're like, I can't believe that movie with that name exists, which is surprising to me that people haven't heard that term repeated over and over again. But I think people have seen that character repeated over and over again. I won't list all the different ones, but it was invented by Spike Lee, or the term was invented by Spike Lee because of a thing that he observed in so many movies where the black character is not there to serve their own interests. They're there, and this is kind of elided or explained in the movie itself, to make the main character feel comfortable and good about themselves, and also the audience to feel good about themselves in a way that allows them to identify with the main white character while also feeling representation from a side black character, while also kind of exposing some undercurrent tacit beliefs of the spirituality or earthiness or less intellectual aspects of black people in general. And it's a thing you see in movies time and time again. You've seen Morgan Freeman in anything. You've seen it time and time again. There's this magical quality, but that also
Driving Miss Daisy is a good
character,
example of this, but also
strips its
Shawshank
character
Redemption.
of their agency. There you go. And it's something that we see over and over again. Tropes aren't bad. They're just kind of like figures of speech that we put into storytelling to build stories. But this is one that we see a lot in a not great light.
Sarah-Tai, maybe we could just spend a real quick moment here giving some people some examples of characters who might fit the trope. I might bring up Green Book, which was billed as a reverse magical Negro trope, but really was just a magical Negro trope in the regular direction that you'd expect it, which is like Viggo Mortensen coming to realization like, wow, racism, real bad because of everything that Mahershala Ali goes through. But Sarah-Tai, maybe you want to spend 30 seconds giving some famous examples of magical Negroes.
Yeah, of course. As Jackson said, Morgan Freeman truly has made a mint playing these characters. Going back to mid-century, we've got Uncle Remus, Song of the South, Will Smith, Legend of Bagger Vance, Michael Clark Duncan in The Green Mile.
Yes,
that's a
my
great
personal
one.
favorite, Michael Clark Duncan. The Magical Negress, lest we forget, Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost, Jennifer Hudson in the Cursed Sex and the City movie.
Yeah.
There's so many, and I think there's also an ability for counter reading as well. One of my favorite unintentional of these tropes is Morpheus from The Matrix, of course.
Interesting.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, what I like about this is that the magical Negro is a frame that if it's never been introduced to you, then you kind of go hang on, this can't possibly exist, and then you just name every movie.
Exactly. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Exactly right. So then we get this movie, Kathleen. We get this movie, The American Society of Magical Negroes. The protagonist here is a struggling black sculptor named Aaron. He's played by Justice Smith. How would you describe Aaron's life and trajectory here?
I mean, Aaron was a frustrating character.
Okay, go ahead.
Because he didn't feel like a whole person, as much as Justice Smith tried. Justice Smith is a star. I thought that he's very charismatic and great in this film, but he tried his best, but the character's just not there. And one of the interesting things was I feel like it started in a way that maybe we can all recognize. And I'm going to borrow from my colleague, Gloria Lamrou, who wrote a piece in Refinery 29. And she described Aaron in the beginning of the film as being amiable to a fault, shrinking himself to near oblivion, turning into a human pinball to avoid even the possibility of being in the way of white people. And how he kind of deflates and defers to the white gaze, which I thought is a really interesting starting point for a Black character, especially like a light-skinned Black character like Aaron. And then the film never delivers on its promise to critique the magical Negro trope, to give Aaron an arc that feels triumphant or interesting or full. Like, it just never gets there. And I think that is the most frustrating thing. I know a lot of people judge this movie just based on the trailer, but unfortunately, I was ready to go in there and defend it. I was ready. I saw it at Sundance. I was ready to go in there and say, hey, you're wrong, give it a chance. And it just doesn't get there.
That's the thing about the trailer, Jackson, is that like it appeared to be a promising dissection and investigation of the trope and maybe an attempt to kind of subvert it. Let's just cut right to the chase. How do you feel about the way that the film used the magical Negro trope? Did it criticize it? Did it subvert it in any way for you?
I don't know if you're going to disagree with me, but I feel like this perfectly explains what Sarah was saying before about how there's so many bad movies out there and like there's accomplished directors that know what they're doing. Yeah. This movie is so amateurishly made that it hurts me. I think that it has such a good starting point, but the building blocks of story don't make sense. It doesn't know if it's going to satirize the aspect of magical Negro. It doesn't know if it wants to go along with Aaron and give him a full story. It doesn't know if it wants to be a rom-com. There's just things like The Room where things just happen inexplicably. They don't fit together as story building blocks. It's something that Ava DuVernay truly does understand. We get David Allen Greer as like the making fun of magical Negroes, but he himself is a magical Negro in a non-satirical way. We don't get an in-depth look at who he is, why he's there. He's just there to move the story along. I think at the heart of this film, what's so interesting is Aaron's character. He has this statement about seeing this white Wall Street guy getting robbed, and the mugger pulled out a knife for him, and Aaron's like, the first thing that he thought was he was giving him a gift, and he couldn't understand that anyone would do him harm. I just want to feel like what that feels like. That resonated with me, but the movie doesn't fit it together in any cogent commentary. It's a bad story. It's an insulting story. It makes me so mad. Oh my goodness.
Well, tell us how you really feel, pal. I mean,
angry at this movie. It could be so good.
Sarah-Tai, like the frustration here is that like satire can be such a powerful tool, especially when wielded by Black filmmakers to comment on racism. Like, satire is a very useful tool. We've seen Spike Lee use it quite effectively to sort of satirize the Black American experience and also the white American experience. And then, like, recently we've had a pretty successful satire movie in American Fiction. It won an Oscar, you know. When you look at this movie and you look at American Fiction and you kind of look at where the tradition of satire is right now, are there places that you like to see this generation of Black filmmakers take it that they're just not taking it?
I mean, after watching this movie and American Fiction almost back to back, I think we need to call like an emergency Black people meeting, specifically the subcommittee of like biracial. So you think you got your degree with Professor Emeritus Larry Wilmore. Like, we need to have a meeting because the satire is horrible. It's stunted. And as you said, like, satire is such an amazing tool. And one of the few tools we see on like the quote unquote main stage that can be cutting and toothy. And here there's just like a complete misunderstanding of the trope in general. As Jackson said, it's rehashing the trope in its own making, which is so strange. I would love to see directors and screenwriters like study up. I think the tradition of satire requires a knowledge of our past and how we got here and how people before us have reacted. I think there needs to be like an Ishmael Reed intensive led by Ishmael Reed himself, because a lot of people around here are walking around with, to quote Kathleen, low-level knowledge. And satire has to be smart. And, you know, exactly. I also want to acknowledge that part of this industry, part of the so-called scarcity of Black filmmakers is this idea that every idea has to be an original idea. And I think that's also very much at work here.
The emergency meeting took me out. Thank you so much for that.
Listen, I send an invite out to Drake every year, and he does not come. Action item, Drake.
With the deepest regrets, we have to leave it there. But that's a wonderful place to leave it. Sarah-Tai Black, Jackson Weaver, Kathleen Newman-Bremang, thank you for your time. And thank you for the laughs, y'all. Thank you so much for your energy for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Needed that laugh.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Kathleen Newman-Bremang is Deputy Director of Refinery 29 Unbothered. Sarah-Tai Black is a culture critic based in Toronto. Jackson Weaver is a reporter at CBC Entertainment Unit. The American Society of Magical Negroes is in theaters right now. That is it for the podcast today. Remember, you can listen to any episode of the show anytime you like, wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, tomorrow on the show, we are going to be talking about Haiti. We've seen in the news that gang violence has been escalating a lot. We're going to check in with the music community in Haiti because it's basically resulted in a lot of artists having to reschedule their concerts or sort of calibrate how closely associated to gangs they appear to be, and it's causing quite a bit of problems. In the meantime, check us out on Instagram. We are at COMMOTION CBC. My name is Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. I'm going to be back tomorrow. I will see you then.